Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. Last weekend, two great tournaments took place in Italy, which were the Galactus Regional in Rome and the Italian Open the day after. And finally, I was able to bring the Red Dragon Archfiend deck to such tournaments. In today's video, we are going to go over my deck list, all the side patterns into the different matchups, and I'm gonna provide a full tournament report because I took a lot of notes between the rounds. But before dive deep into the discussion, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. So about the main deck, I won't focus a lot on it and I won't give a lot of explanations because you can find them in pretty much all the previous videos. So if you're interested in the ratios and my specific thoughts, take a look at those. About the tuners, we played the Free Resonator Call, Free Gaia. This time I didn't play the Whale, mainly because I was lazy and I didn't have one available, but even then I would have just played one instead of one Gaia. And in a way, now that Ghost Ogre is in the format, this might be a good bait. Then I played of course the Free Soul Resonator, and for the bad tuners of course the 1 Crimson and the 2 Vision. Then once again I played the Free Prosperity, which mainly leads to the best card of the deck, which is Freeborn Archfiend with 1 Foolish, and I still played the Wandering King Wildwind. It's still mandatory I believe, but many of the games that I lost actually involved this card being stuck in hand. And then I played the Free Supei, which I'm gonna talk more when we get to the tournament report. Of course with them it comes the Supei, still the worst card of the deck, the Synchron Resonator, the Uvoloop and the Red Zone. Not much to say about them, those were amazing as I expected, and Synchron is still an engine requirement, but a really good card. Now for the non-engine, I kept with the Entraps because as I said many times, those are the best type of non-engine that you can play in this deck. And I had Free Ash Blossom, the Free Effect Veilers, Free Imperms, of course, and then this time I didn't play Nib, at least in the main deck, and I decided to run the Ghost Ogre. The reason for that is that I was expecting more decks like Tenpai, Melodious, Voiceless, and all of them gets hit by Ogre, while Nibiru is only good against Snake Eye and only in combination, so it doesn't have a good coverage into the metagame, while Ogre also hits Flander, Runic Stun and weird anti-meta decks, so I felt like it was more versatile, at least in the main deck. And then I still played the Call by the Grave, because not only it's a potential out for the Puppet Lock, but also has an added benefit in this deck, which is make your Dispater a potential negate without relying on your opponent playing into it. I felt like they were great, and moving forward, having 13 on engines, I'd probably still play them, but we're gonna talk deeper about them when we get to the side deck. Now for the extra deck, if you saw my previous videos, you'll know that it's pretty much solved. For the low levels, I still have the Free Red Rising and the Kui Belt, very important. The 2 Scarred, please never cut one of them, and the 2 Red Dragon Archfiend. And then for the utilities, I played the Scarlight, which never came up in this tournament. I don't know if I missed some spot where it actually could have been useful. I thought about summoning it a couple times, but I never did. Then we still had the 2 Outred. This one is the main flex spot. I know that a lot of people plays the Void Ogre, I don't like it. I never want to play hoping that I don't have cards in hand. I actually won a game specifically because I played 2, but you can still cut one of them pretty easy. Then I played the Bane, the Dispater, which is still the best card of the deck. I played the Red Supernova, which I finally was able to summon and in a way solved a matchup. And I played the Typhoon, which this time was finally very important. I actually won 2 matches that I would never won if I didn't play it. So this is exactly the reason why you play this card. In theory it's never great, but when you actually get to a tournament in real game scenarios, you'll find it pretty useful. Now for the more interesting part, let's talk about the side deck and also the side patterns. This time I really put a work into it, even though I just came to the conclusion last minute, so I wasn't really able to test those choices, but I feel like I had a strong theory behind them. Now the pretty much mandatory ones, which I was sure that I would have played them anyways, were at least 4 Bestials and at least the 3 Cosmic Cyclones. These ones, cause of course, are great against Snake Eye, which is still the best deck, And also against the Puppet Lock, they also have the benefit of being level 6, which can lead to some plays when you go second. Again, as you already know, if you follow the channel, I don't feel like they really fit with what we're trying to accomplish with the deck, since they're level 6 that can't push if you get interrupted early on the Soul Resonator, and neither if you get interrupted on Bone or on Red Rising. And I only play them as non-engines if they're good in the matchup. Those ones were also really important because we had a raise on popularity on the Runic Stand deck, at least from the results of the previous YCS. They also cover the Tenpai matchup. They don't go under shifter like Ghost Ogre does, and you can put them against Voiceless, Flounder, and all the matchups that rely on continuous or field spells. So they had great coverage, they're versatile, and I was sure that I wanted to play them. And then, keeping in mind that Snake Eye is still the best deck, I wanted to add more cards to go second. At first, I thought about playing Mind Control and Change of Heart, cause many of the standard lines end on Apollousa, especially if they want to play around Nib, but even if they don't, they will include it. And being able to steal Apollousa can not only solve one of your main issues, but also play around the IP into SP line or the Princess. Of course, that falls apart if they have something like an Effect Veiler, cause they will still chain it, so Apollousa won't resolve, and the cards that you were actually trying to prevent, like the SP or the Princess, will still come up. And since your engine is not that resilient going second, I left that idea. But I still wanted to play some sort of board breaker cards that could have coverage against Despia, while also being more cards that I could put against the Snake Eye, even though they weren't perfect, because in the end you never know what you are gonna play against, especially in those sort of big regional tournaments, and I decided to run 2 Forbidden Droplet. I ended up with them because I wanted to have a card that could be flexible even against Tenpai, and if you put them going first and you don't get shifter, and spoiler, I choose to go first against Tenpai after siding, I will explain that in a moment. This is one of the cards that pretty much always guarantee that you are not gonna lose to them. Also, when you play against them, you never know if they're actually gonna go first after siding, and this one can also interact with Seal. So about the going first cards, in the past I was playing the Fiendish Golem and also 2 Triple Tactics Talent, which in a way could have been sort of board breakers alongside droplets. But I found them very underwhelming, and since there is a design going second deck in the format, I wanted to have guaranteed cards that, even if drawn alone, could solve the matchup. Also, the worst feeling that you can possibly experience with this deck is having talent and your opponent stopping you with an imperm, which was something that I really wanted to avoid. Instead, I decided to run real going first cards, and those were Anti-Spell and Skill Drain. This may seem like a weird choice, but the reason was that I only wanted to dedicate 3 slots to the going first, because I can switch the bad end traps with them, like the Ghost Ogres when they're not ideal, and also we're still a sort of combo deck, so we don't want to dedicate many slots to the going first. Of course, I could have played more Skill Drains, or I could have cut the Fiendish Golem entirely, but I still wanted to have it because it's a searchable one and can improve your handboards, especially against Snake Eye and Despia, while for those ones you need to rely on drawing them or adding them with Prosperity, which you are probably gonna do only if you were able to play, so technically you are still in a good spot. They found Anti-Spell a little bit better because, first of all, it can be sided against Runic Stun, and also not only shuts down the engine of your opponent, but also their non-engines like Storm and Droplet, which they'll be forced to use immediately. Now, you might argue that mathematically speaking, this is not worth it, because your chances of drawing them or adding them with Prosperity when you're also able to play are pretty low, but I wanted to have cards that could win the game on the spot, even if I was interrupted pretty early, and as long as you have like a Crimson Guy on the board, or a Bone Archfiend in the graveyard, you can always shut them down, or, and this is even crazier, you can easily OTK keeping Skill Drain on the board, which at that point makes Nibiru the only possible way for your opponent to prevent your OTK. They were great, and moving forward I'd probably play more Skill Drains. Now, I still had to add more cards for the Snake Eye matchup, and in the end I decided to go with the Nibiru. And the reason for that is that even if it's great only against them, it's still one of the best cards that you can also put in going first. So in a way it goes alongside those traps, but also it's great in combinations. It's so easy for you to reach an OTK even if your board was removed. So I don't know if it was a lazy choice, but it was worth the inclusion. And I only played 2 because I went to 20 cards going second against Snake Eye. Potentially I could even put in more, but I wanted to have this sort of flexibility, maybe it was wrong, and I still played the Red Resonator. Once again, it never came up. I only put it one time and unfortunately I wasn't able to access it. Usually I don't go into time with this deck because either losing or winning through an OTK or with your board resolving, it's pretty quick. But I figured like many opponents would have needed to read my cards since they're not that popular. So I feared to go into time, and leaving one win condition. The deck is supposed to be insane on time because you have so many pushes. I can show some of them maybe in the future, but this time again wasn't useful. You still have Scarlet and some ways to trigger it. This was just to be sure to have a strong win condition and more pushes, but I'ma be honest, it's not that great. You could probably play the third of one of those cards instead and be fine with that. Now, the more important topic of discussion that I can really go deep on is the side patterns. That's always a work in progress, so those conclusions might not be the same moving forward. But I try to realize what's really mandatory and how we realistically win games going second, so I decided that I wanted to cut redundancy and also unrealistic plays. The mandatory side outs when we go second, besides of the matchup, unless we are playing specifically against Runic Stun or against Lab, is the red zone because it's just too slow. We don't want to draw a trap when we go second. I always side out one prosperity unless, let's say, we are playing against a shifter deck like Kashtira and we want to dig for Supei because it allows to extend, or when I played Lightning Storm, if it was really good into the matchup, to dig for that. Then, going second, I always side out the Crimson Resonator because it's just useless. It's not realistic to have a push with it because the amount of non-tuners is so low. It's just a -1, you'll never resolve its effect. The fact that you can special summon it, it's completely irrelevant because your choke points are still the same. It also conflicts with Nibiru and Bestials, so it's just a bad card. We don't need it, never. What we're trying to do going second, it's just to access the Dispatter line with the level 8 to play around Nib, potentially. Or of course, if we stop them, we can even trade 1 for 1 and try to establish Hotred or the Dispatter itself. But you are never gonna win a game going second with this card. Then of course I side out 1 Crimson Gaia because it's just redundant. I never side out 2 because you need to be able to access them, and also they're important to push since they can revive guys and also came up in your main OTK line. And then if it's not great into the matchup, you can side out the Cold Vibe. However, I keep it against Snake Eye, I keep it against Tenpai, and I also keep it against Branded, which are already a lot of matchups, because not only you fear your opponent's board, but you also fear the entraps. But if this card is great against the engine, like you can prevent a princess, or of course you can use it against the puppet lock, more often than not this card stays in the deck. But those are the usuals side out, and then of course you adapt your non-engines depending on the matchup. So those thoughts apply in general, but if your opponent deck is weak to Bestials, so I'm gonna put them after siding, and their boards revolve around negates, I'm gonna side out the Supei package. This card is only good if your opponent plays removals, otherwise going second it's just unreliable. If you have it against an Apollousa, you can already go to the next game. And also those are exactly 4 cards, which means that you can swap easily them with the Bestials. So against decks that have removals, I usually keep both. But as I said, if I played against Snake Eye, or probably even Voiceless, I used to cut them and to replace them with Bestials, which are way better going second, more reliable, and also require less commitment. Now, about the specific matchups. If I go second against Snake Eye, mainly the pure build, I take out those 8 cards and I put in the 2 Nibirus, the 2 Droplets, even though they're not ideal, but they can still put in the work, and the 4 Bestials. As I said, you could go even further and probably make space for like 23 non-engines, cause in the end your way of winning going second it's mainly to prevent them from have a board entirely, and your engine can still push through some little interruption or make usage of those cards on the board. But I wasn't sure if I really would have faced that many Snake Eyes. Instead I played against an insane amount of them, and we're gonna talk about it when we get to the tournament reports. If we go second against Branded, we take out those 4 cards and the Frigos Togre, cause are almost useless in the matchup, and we put in the same 6, which are Droplets and the Bestials, And we have one more slot. I still didn't solve it, and usually I was keeping one cosmic, which is not ideal at all, but might force an early red or some threats, because in the end, if it goes for the puppet lock and you didn't prevent it, you are still gonna lose to it. So it's not Cosmic the card that will let you lose that matchup, but probably we can find a better solution to that. Against Voiceless it was pretty similar. I was still putting in the 4 Bestials, the 2 Forbidden Droplets, and also some Cosmics, because they can answer the trap card, and as I said, since they have easy access to negates, I was taking out the Supei package, so those are 8 cards, and you can decide if you want to take out the Cold Buy also. Now the weirdest ones were decks like Kashtira, because we're not playing real board breakers against them. We can put those 5, or even put randomly 2 Bestials, maybe for Shifter, because they can help to reach big synchro monsters, but we don't fear that much that matchup. And against Flu, once again, you have those 5 which are decent, plus the amount of fan traps that we play in the main deck, and we have the Ghost Ogre which put in some work against them. Now, siding for going first, it's pretty easy. We basically put always in those 3 cards and we side out some bad end traps into the matchup. If we're playing against Snake Eye, we also add 2 Nibs and we side out the 3 Ghost Ogres and some of like an Ash Blossom or even an Effect Veiler. Most of the cards that we play in our side deck can provide some sort of value going first. I also thought about this idea of siding in a Magnamut and a Baldrake, because in basically any case they will lead to one more interruption on your board, even if you get nibbed in the end. But I didn't go deeper on this thought, because they never help to push your game state to the next point, so I was scared of having them stuck in my hand, and that's why I always said that they're not great extenders. If I play against Shifter decks, I always side out the Ghost Ogres for Cosmic Cyclones, because against Cash, not only they cover Birth, but of course they're also great against the Field Spell, and against Flu it's pretty much the same, but they don't play into Shifter. Now, the more interesting one to discuss is Tenpai. I feel like we have an insane matchup against them, and the reason is that engine against engine we have perfect interruptions for them, because the standard board with this Spatter and Hotred can completely ignore the field spell and just go after their main engine, because this Spatter can perfectly counter the Chandra from hand and Hotred can negate the Kaimen in battle phase. So there's actually no way for their engine to overcome our board. And that's just huge, because usually this pattern is not that effective into your opponent's engine. So if you're able to establish your board, you only have to cover their board breakers, and nothing prevents you to have other end traps and other forms of interruptions. Also, they play Lightning Storm, but we can easily cover it with Soul Resonator. And what about Droplet? We always have the chance to chain the red zone to it and negate it with Hotred. And at that point, we still have the Dispatter live for their Chandra. So, as I said, engine against engine, I believe we have an insane advantage, and that's why I always choose to go first after side deck. Now, going into the tournament, I wasn't sure if the popular strategy was to let your opponent go first after siding, or instead to choose to go first. Of course, if they have Dimensional Barrier and Heatwave, they have basically turn skips against us, so it's more likely that they go first after side deck. But my standard plan, if I had to choose, was of course to put in those 3, and I usually put Golem even if I wasn't sure to go first or second, because at the very least, if I get Heatwaved or Dimensional Barrier, it's a card that I can search with Gaia to add one more layer of protection for the next turn. I was putting in some Cosmics instead of the Ghost Ogres, because they were versatile into Shifter, especially if they expect to go first, they are gonna put Shifter in the deck, but as I said, I'm gonna let them go second, so I need something to cover Shifter and also play into their engine. I was still putting in the 2 Forbidden Droplets, because even though they lose to Shifter, they're basically better Imperms and Veilers, which are not ideal against the matchup. In theory they would be great, because they don't have much engine, but in my experience they were playing cards like Desires, so they never had just the Hydra, which is the only way for them to lose to a single effect negation, and in battle phase they're great to play around them. And then, as I said, we could technically explore the idea of putting in 2 Bestials, because not only they can be interruption to supplement our board, but also are bodies that go down in the battle phase, so they can slow down their OTK. Unfortunately, I didn't have full knowledge of the matchup, so I don't know if there are specific spots if you just put in another body they can't OTK you, but those were my ideas, and usually I was gonna side some Ghost Ogre outs and some copies of the effect negations, because as I said, especially Veiler, even though it would technically be a good card in the matchup, more often than not is either not gonna be enough or completely dead. Now, about what I was expecting for the tournament, I thought that the field would have been full with Tenpais, since it's a cheap deck, it just came out, it's really friendly for those who are not following the game that much. But instead I was surprised. I only faced one on the first tournament and one in the Italian Open, and everyone was on Snake Eye. I don't know if that was just my experience. I saw some reports of people saying that they played like 3 Tenpai per day, but on the first day in 8 rounds I played against 4 Snake Eyes, and the same happened the day after. So I was kinda sad for that, because I feel like I had a really great advantage against Tenpai, even though of course they have many blowouts that can gain them one game, but the fact that they're gonna let us go first and we have such strong counters for the main engine is an insane advantage on game 1. If your local environment is full with Tenpai and you follow those principles that I just discussed, I can confidently say that you are gonna have an amazing experience against them with this deck. So that concludes our discussion about the deck itself, the matchups and my preparation. I'm gonna go super deep about the tournament experience, because I collected notes from every single game of the tournaments, so be sure to stay tuned because it will be out very soon.